Sube mi caballo, vaquero, dijo la mujer apache quasi negó a dejarlo morir solo. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the desert. The heat of the day had slowly faded into a dry chill, and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and dust. A lone cowboy stumbled through the rough, rocky terrain, each step heavier than the last. His clothes were torn and dusty, his hat hanging low to shield his sunburned face, and his boots were scuffed and worn from the endless miles he had traveled. He had been riding for days, trying to escape from a band of outlaws who had ambushed him. But now, exhausted and injured, he could barely keep his eyes open. Every movement sent sharp pain through his side, and his throat felt parched despite the little water he had left. He collapsed onto the sand, gasping for air, and tried to steady himself. The world seemed to blur around him, and he could barely hear the faint rustle of desert leaves in the evening breeze. He knew he needed water, food, and rest, but there was nothing in sight except the empty expanse of rocks and shrubs. He wondered if this might be the end, if he would be left to fade away alone in the wilderness. His thoughts wandered to his family back home, to the people he had left behind, and a wave of regret washed over him. He had always thought he could face danger alone, that he could survive anything with his skills as a rider and a gunman. But now, lying in the desert, he realized how fragile life really was. Just as hopelessness began to creep in, he heard a distant sound, a rhythmic beat of hooves on stone and sand. He squinted against the fading light, trying to see what was coming. At first he thought it might be a mirage, a trick of his weary mind. But then he saw her, a woman riding a strong, dark horse. She moved with quiet confidence, her posture straight and steady, her eyes scanning the horizon with a careful watchfulness. She wore clothing that blended with the earth, practical and sturdy, and her long hair was pulled back, tied in a braid that swung with the horse's movements. There was a calm authority in the way she rode, a presence that seemed to command respect from the land itself. The cowboy tried to call out, his voice weak and hoarse, but the words caught in his throat. He was too tired, too injured, and for a moment he could only watch. The woman slowed her horse as she approached, studying him carefully. She could see the pain etched on his face, the way he leaned heavily on one leg, the blood that had dried on his shirt. There was no hesitation in her eyes, no fear. She could have ridden past him and left him to the desert, and no one would have known. But instead she guided her horse closer, coming to a halt a few feet away from him. "Sube mi caballo, vaquero," she said, her voice calm but firm, carrying through the open air. The words were foreign to him at first, but the meaning was clear. She was offering help, a chance to survive. The cowboy's pride rose up, as it always did when someone offered assistance, especially someone he did not know, someone from a different world, a different culture. He wanted to refuse, to insist that he could manage on his own. But the pain in his side reminded him that he was not strong enough, that he might not last another hour alone. He slowly nodded, swallowing his pride, and allowed her to help him onto the horse. She guided him carefully, her hands steady and sure, making sure he did not fall. Once he was seated, he could feel the power and steadiness of her horse, the rhythm of its movements under him. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of security, a feeling that he might actually make it through this. The woman climbed onto her horse beside him, and together they moved through the desert, heading toward a place unknown but promising hope. As they rode, the cowboy tried to gather his thoughts. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand who she was and why she had chosen to help him. But the words came slowly, and his body ached with every movement. The woman noticed his struggle and spoke gently. "Hold on," she said, her eyes scanning the terrain ahead. "We are not far from water, but we must move carefully. The desert is full of danger even at night." The cowboy nodded again, grateful for her guidance. He had seen many travelers lost in the desert, some who never returned. He knew that without her, he would be another forgotten soul, swallowed by the unforgiving land. The reality of his vulnerability pressed on him, and he realized that this moment, this act of kindness, was more powerful than any gun, any skill he had learned. The sun disappeared completely, leaving a twilight that made the desert seem even more vast and mysterious. Stars began to appear one by one, twinkling faintly above the horizon. The temperature dropped, and the wind carried a slight chill, but the cowboy felt a warmth in the presence of the woman and her horse. They moved steadily, neither rushing nor slowing, navigating the rough landscape with care and precision. As they rode, the cowboy began to notice small details. The way she adjusted her reins, the careful way she avoided loose rocks, the way her eyes never stopped moving, always alert. He realized that she had survived in this land her entire life, that she understood it in ways he could never hope to. And yet, despite the challenges she must face every day, she had chosen to help him, a stranger, a man who had no right to expect mercy. Hours passed, and the desert seemed endless, but the woman never faltered. She spoke occasionally, sharing small observations about the land, about the plants, about the stars above. Her voice was steady, soothing, and her words carried a wisdom born of experience. The cowboy listened, absorbing every detail, feeling a growing respect for her and a deep gratitude for her courage. Finally, in the distance, he saw a faint glimmer of light, the reflection of water from a small river or pond. The woman guided the horse carefully down the slope, avoiding sharp rocks and deep sand. When they reached the water, the cowboy dismounted with her help, feeling his legs tremble from weakness. He drank deeply, savoring every drop, feeling life returning to his body. The woman did not rush him. She waited patiently, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger, her presence a steady reassurance. As he finished drinking, the cowboy looked at her, realizing he owed his life to this stranger, this woman who had refused to leave him behind. He wanted to say thank you, but words felt small compared to the magnitude of what she had done. Instead, he simply nodded, a silent gesture of respect and gratitude. She returned the nod, her expression calm but kind, as if to say, "You will survive. That is enough." That night, as they rested near the water, the cowboy could not sleep, his mind racing with thoughts of what had brought him here and what he had learned in these first hours with her. He realized that courage came in many forms, not just in facing danger alone, but in choosing to help someone else despite the risks. And he understood, with a clarity he had never felt before, that survival was not just about strength or skill, but about trust, compassion, and the willingness to accept help when it was offered. The stars continued to shine above, the desert night full of quiet sounds and distant movements. The cowboy knew that this journey was only beginning, that the challenges ahead would be many, and that the road to safety would not be easy. But for the first time in days, he felt hope. He was not alone, and that made all the difference. The woman and her horse had shown him that even in a harsh, unforgiving world, there were moments of kindness and courage that could change a life forever. And as he closed his eyes, letting the gentle night settle over him, he whispered quietly to himself, almost in disbelief, "I am not alone, I am not alone," knowing that the woman who had saved him would guide him through the dangers ahead, one step at a time. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange. The cowboy awoke to the sound of birds calling in the distance and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. He felt the soreness in his body, a reminder of the injuries he had suffered the day before. His side ached with every movement, and his legs were stiff from riding the horse so long. But as he looked at the woman beside him, tending to her horse with quiet care, he felt a flicker of hope. She had not left him behind, and for that, he was grateful beyond words. She noticed him stirring and gave a small nod, her expression calm. Without speaking, she gestured toward the horse, and he understood. It was time to continue. He struggled to mount the horse, wincing as his injured side protested, but her steady hands helped him, making sure he did not fall. Once he was seated, he took a deep breath and looked around. The desert stretched endlessly, a vast land of sand, rocks, and sparse vegetation. It seemed unending, yet with her guidance, he felt that survival was possible. As they rode, the cowboy realized that the woman moved with an ease and confidence he could never match. Her horse navigated the rough terrain with sure-footedness, stepping carefully over loose stones and avoiding hidden dips in the sand. The woman spoke occasionally, pointing out subtle dangers that he had never noticed. "Watch the rocks," she said, her voice steady. "Some are loose and can throw your horse off balance. Stay alert." He nodded, trying to follow her advice, but he knew he had much to learn about surviving in this land. Hours passed, and the desert seemed unchanging, yet every moment was filled with small challenges. The sun climbed higher, heating the land, and the cowboy felt sweat running down his face despite the early hour. He tried to keep pace with her, but his body was weak, and his horse tired from the previous day's journey. He wanted to stop to rest, but she never slowed. She seemed to know exactly how long they could push forward, when to conserve energy, and when to take risks. Slowly, he began to trust her instincts, realizing that her knowledge of the land was far greater than his own. As they rode, small interactions between them began to reveal pieces of who she was. She spoke of the desert as if it were a living thing, describing the plants and animals with a reverence he had never known. She told him which herbs could be used for medicine, which streams were safe to drink from, and how to find shade in the harsh sun. He listened, amazed at the depth of her knowledge, and he began to see the desert not as an enemy, but as a place of quiet beauty and hidden resources. Despite his admiration, the cowboy's pride still battled with his gratitude. He had always believed he could handle anything alone, that asking for help was a weakness. Yet, in the face of her quiet strength, he understood that survival was not about pride but about recognizing when one needed help. He began to speak more, asking questions about her life, about her people, and why she had chosen to help him. She answered slowly, cautiously, revealing only small pieces at first. "I have learned the desert does not forgive mistakes," she said one afternoon as they rested under a lone tree. "It teaches respect, patience, and care. I cannot leave someone to die when I can help. Life is too precious to waste." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that courage came in many forms, and sometimes it was not about fighting but about compassion, about making the choice to protect life even when it was difficult or dangerous. As the day went on, they encountered small challenges that tested both their skill and their trust. A sudden sandstorm blew in, and the wind howled around them, making it difficult to see or hear. The cowboy's horse grew restless, frightened by the storm, but the woman remained calm, guiding both horses through the chaos with steady hands and a clear mind. He followed her lead, clinging to the horse and hoping he could mimic her actions, realizing that panicking would only make things worse. Together, they navigated the storm, finally reaching a small ridge where the wind was less harsh. They dismounted, shaking sand from their clothing and horses, and he felt a renewed respect for her courage. In quieter moments, as they walked beside the horses, he began to reflect on his own life. He had spent so many years moving from place to place, always looking out for himself, always thinking of survival as a solitary task. Yet here he was, saved by someone who had no obligation to him, someone who saw value in helping another human being. He felt a mixture of shame and gratitude, understanding that his previous ideas about strength and independence had been incomplete. True strength, he realized, included empathy, trust, and the willingness to work together. The woman noticed his silence and offered a small smile. "The desert can teach many lessons," she said softly. "Sometimes it shows us what we are capable of. Other times it shows us what we must learn from others." He nodded, taking in her words, feeling their truth resonate deep within him. He realized that this journey was more than a fight for survival. It was a journey of understanding, a chance to see the world through eyes other than his own. As evening approached, they found a small stream, the water glinting in the fading light. The cowboy dismounted, grateful for the opportunity to rest, and drank deeply, feeling strength returning to his body. The woman watched carefully, ensuring they were safe, her eyes constantly scanning the surrounding landscape. When he looked at her, he saw a quiet determination, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. She had faced challenges every day of her life, yet she chose to act with kindness and courage, and he was beginning to understand the depth of her character. That night, as they set up a small camp near the stream, the cowboy felt a sense of security he had not known in years. The desert was still dangerous, still unpredictable, but with her by his side, he felt he had a chance. They sat beside the fire, eating a small meal of dried meat and berries, and he listened as she explained more about the land, the plants, and the ways her people had survived for generations. He asked questions, eager to learn, and she answered patiently, sharing her knowledge with care and attention. The firelight danced across their faces, casting shadows that flickered in the quiet night. The cowboy realized that trust was growing between them, built slowly through shared hardship, quiet conversation, and mutual respect. He thought about the many dangers that lay ahead, but he no longer felt completely alone. He understood that with courage, skill, and guidance, even the harshest landscape could be navigated. Before sleep claimed him, he looked at her once more. She was tending to her horse, her movements precise and calm, and he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Without her, he might not have survived the desert, and yet she had offered help without hesitation, guided him without complaint, and protected him without expectation. He understood that this journey would test him in ways he could not yet imagine, but he also knew that he had found an ally, a guide, and perhaps a friend in someone he had once thought very different from himself. As he drifted into a light, restless sleep, the cowboy felt the weight of his injuries, the exhaustion of travel, and the uncertainty of the journey ahead. But he also felt hope, a sense that he could continue, that he could survive, and that he might even learn something important about life, trust, and humanity along the way. The desert night was quiet, save for the soft sounds of water flowing and horses breathing, and he realized that he was not alone, that he had someone who had chosen to walk beside him in the harshest conditions. And for the first time in many days, he felt that survival was not just possible. It was something he could face with courage, and the knowledge that kindness could exist even in the wildest places. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the desert sky with soft pinks and golds. The cowboy awoke with a sense of cautious optimism. He had survived another night, and the presence of the woman beside him gave him a quiet comfort. She had already saddled her horse and was checking the equipment, making sure everything was in order before they continued. He watched her for a moment, noticing the way her hands moved with practiced skill, gentle yet precise, every movement deliberate. It was clear she had done this countless times before, and it amazed him how calm and steady she remained, even in the harsh desert environment. As he prepared to mount his horse, she spoke softly, almost as if thinking aloud. "The desert teaches patience," she said. "It teaches respect, but sometimes it also teaches about the past, about the things we carry inside." The cowboy listened, sensing that she was about to share something important. He had come to trust her guidance, and now he was curious about her story, about the life that had shaped such courage and compassion. They rode together in silence for a while, the horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The landscape stretched endlessly, dotted with sagebrush, cacti, and rocky outcrops. The cowboy noticed how she navigated the terrain with ease, avoiding pitfalls and choosing paths that were safer yet still swift. She seemed to know the desert like an old friend, aware of every hidden danger, every place to rest, every source of water. Her knowledge was not just practical but instinctive, and he realized that she had spent her life learning to live in harmony with the land, a skill he had never needed until now. After some time, they found a quiet spot to rest beneath a large rock formation. The cowboy dismounted, his body still weak from previous injuries and exhaustion. She gestured for him to sit, and he did, leaning back against the stone, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. She watched him with careful eyes, and then, as if deciding it was time, she began to speak. "I have lived in this land all my life," she said slowly, her voice steady but thoughtful. "My people have always depended on the desert, on its rivers, its plants, and its animals. We learn from it, respect it, and survive with it, but it is not an easy life. We have faced danger, hunger, and loss, and still, we continue." She paused, looking at the horizon as though the wind could carry her words back to her ancestors. "I help those in need because I know what it is to struggle alone, to face danger without anyone to guide you. Life is precious, and we cannot waste it by turning away from others when we have the power to help." The cowboy listened intently, feeling a deep respect growing within him. He had always thought of survival as a personal matter, a test of skill and strength. But now he realized that survival was also about relationships, about trust and compassion. The woman's words were not just about the desert, they were about life itself, and about the choices people make when faced with difficult circumstances. After a pause, the cowboy began to speak of his own past. He told her about the days he had spent traveling alone, about the mistakes he had made, and the people he had left behind. He spoke of fear, of loneliness, and of the moments when he had wished someone would appear to help him, someone who could understand his struggles. Her eyes remained calm and attentive, never judging, simply listening. He found himself opening up in a way he had never done before, as if the desert and her presence had created a space where honesty and vulnerability were possible. As the sun climbed higher, they prepared to continue their journey. The cowboy had learned to watch her movements, to understand her silent signals, and to follow her guidance. He noticed how she moved with ease, how she made decisions quickly yet carefully, and how she seemed to anticipate dangers before they even appeared. It became clear to him that she had survived not just because of skill, but because of experience, patience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. During the ride, they encountered a small herd of deer in the distance. The woman slowed her horse and gestured for the cowboy to do the same. "See them," she whispered. "They teach us about awareness. Always watch the land, watch the signs. The desert speaks if you listen." The cowboy nodded, understanding that this journey was not just about reaching safety. It was about learning, about seeing the world through different eyes, and about respecting the forces around him. Later, as they rode along a narrow path with steep cliffs on either side, the cowboy's horse stumbled slightly. He panicked for a moment, but she reached out, steadying him with a firm yet gentle grip. "Calm," she said, her voice low but commanding. "Trust your horse. Trust yourself." He took a deep breath, focusing on her words, and slowly regained control. In that moment, he realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. By mid-afternoon, they stopped again near a small grove of trees, where the woman gathered some edible plants and herbs. She showed him how to identify which plants were safe to eat, which could be used for medicine, and which could indicate water nearby. He listened carefully, eager to absorb everything she taught him. He understood that knowledge was as important as strength in the desert, and that her guidance was saving his life in ways he had never imagined. As they rested, she shared more about her people, about the values that guided her life. "We believe that every action has meaning," she explained. Every choice affects others, and we survive not just for ourselves but for our families, our communities, and the land itself. Helping another is not weakness, it is strength. The cowboy reflected on his own life, realizing how often he had acted selfishly, believing survival was only about himself. He felt a mix of shame and gratitude, understanding that he had much to learn. In the quiet moments before evening, the cowboy and the woman shared stories of their pasts in small, careful fragments. She spoke of her family, the hardships they faced, and the lessons she had learned from them. He told of his own struggles, his regrets, and the mistakes that had led him to this desert. Through these conversations, a bond formed between them, not of friendship yet, but of mutual respect, understanding, and recognition of shared humanity despite their different lives. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with deep oranges and purples, the cowboy realized something profound. This journey was no longer just about surviving the desert. It was about growth, understanding, and connection. He had never thought much about the past or about the lessons it could teach him, but now he saw that every hardship, every mistake, and every act of kindness shaped the person he was becoming. That night, as they camped beneath a small rock overhang, he felt a sense of safety he had never known. The woman's presence was reassuring, her knowledge and calm guiding him through the unknown. He watched her tend to the fire and the horses, admiring her quiet strength. In the flickering light, he realized that courage was not always loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, steadfast, and compassionate. He understood that he had been saved not just by her actions, but by the example she set, showing him a new way to approach life. Before sleep claimed him, he looked up at the stars, feeling the vastness of the desert and the smallness of his own fears. Yet he also felt hope, a sense of possibility that he had not experienced in years. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, that danger and hardship were still waiting, but he also knew that he had someone by his side who had already proven the power of courage, knowledge, and compassion. And in that moment, he made a quiet promise to himself, to learn, to grow, and to honor the life that had been given to him through her guidance. As he drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, the cowboy felt a sense of peace, unusual and welcome. The desert night was alive with sounds, the wind through the trees, the soft movement of animals nearby, and the quiet breathing of the horses. He understood that he was not just surviving, he was learning, growing, and becoming more aware of the world and the people around him. And he knew, deep in his heart, that the bond he had begun to form with the woman who had saved him would shape not only the rest of this journey, but perhaps the rest of his life. The morning was quiet, almost too quiet. The desert seemed still, the kind of silence that made every sound sharper, every movement more noticeable. The cowboy awoke, feeling stronger than the day before but still cautious. The woman was already awake, tending to the horses and quietly inspecting the surrounding area. She moved with her usual precision, her eyes scanning every detail, ears alert to even the faintest sound. The cowboy realized that her caution was not just habit, it was survival. In the desert, a single misstep or delay could be fatal. They mounted their horses and continued along a narrow canyon path. The walls rose sharply on either side, creating shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. The cowboy kept close to the woman, trusting her knowledge of the terrain. As they rode, the woman spoke in her calm, deliberate voice. "Paths like these can be dangerous," she said. "They hide obstacles and sometimes people who wish harm. Stay alert and keep your horse steady." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The desert was beautiful, but it could turn deadly in an instant. As they rounded a bend, movement caught the woman's sharp eyes. From the shadows of the canyon, a group of men emerged, riding fast and armed. The cowboy's heart sank. He recognized them, the outlaws who had ambushed him days before. They had been tracking him, relentless and unforgiving. The woman slowed her horse, positioning herself slightly ahead, her eyes calculating, her mind already forming a plan. "We must stay calm," she whispered. "Panic will get us nowhere. Follow my lead and we may have a chance." The cowboy swallowed hard, gripping his reins tightly. He had faced danger before, but this was different. He was still recovering from injuries. His energy was low, and yet he could not deny the growing trust he felt in the woman beside him. Her confidence steadied him, and he realized that together they had a better chance of surviving than he ever would alone. The outlaws spurred their horses, closing the distance quickly. Dust rose in clouds around them, the sound of hooves pounding against the rocky canyon walls echoing like thunder. The cowboy's horse shied at the noise, but the woman's steady presence reassured him. She guided them through narrow paths, using her knowledge of the terrain to make their approach less visible. Every turn, every rock, every shadow became part of a strategy. One of the outlaws called out, his voice rough and threatening. The cowboy felt a surge of fear, but he kept his focus on the woman's movements. She guided them to a hidden ledge overlooking the canyon, a spot where they could defend themselves and perhaps slow their pursuers. The cowboy dismounted, his legs shaking from exertion and fear, and followed her lead. She had already dismounted and was crouched low, scanning the path below. "Stay quiet," she instructed. "Watch for their movements. We need to outthink them, not just outrun them." The cowboy nodded, adrenaline coursing through him. He could see the outlaws searching the canyon below, unaware of the hidden position above. The woman's eyes tracked every movement, calculating distances, angles, and possibilities. She whispered instructions to him, guiding him to help manage the horses while keeping low and silent. The cowboy realized that this was not just a test of courage, but of patience and strategy. The desert, he remembered her words, taught respect and careful observation. Now he was seeing it in practice. The outlaws began to move closer, their voices rough as they shouted orders and threats. The woman gestured for the cowboy to stay still, and together they waited, hidden in the shadows. They could see the horses of the outlaws, the glint of their weapons in the sunlight, and the determination in their movements. The cowboy felt fear rise again, but this time it was tempered by trust and focus. He had learned to watch the signs, to follow guidance, and to act with thought rather than panic. As the outlaws approached a narrow section of the canyon, the woman made her move. She nudged her horse forward, making just enough noise to catch their attention and draw them toward a more confined area. The cowboy followed her lead, keeping low, moving quietly but deliberately. The outlaws, thinking they had spotted the pair, charged, but the terrain worked against them. Rocks shifted, horses slipped slightly, and the woman used every obstacle to her advantage, guiding them away from danger while keeping the cowboy safe. A tense standoff followed, with the outlaws realizing they were being outmaneuvered. The woman remained calm, her eyes sharp, her decisions precise. The cowboy, seeing her in action, felt awe and respect. He understood that her courage was not reckless. It was measured, intelligent, and effective. He began to move with her rhythm, anticipating her instructions, learning to think ahead rather than react. For the first time, he felt that survival was about more than strength or skill. It was about awareness, strategy, and trust. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the outlaws began to retreat, frustrated and unable to predict her movements. The cowboy and the woman remained hidden until the danger passed completely. When the canyon fell silent again, the cowboy exhaled, realizing how close they had come to disaster. The woman remained calm, her eyes scanning the horizon for any other threats. "We are not safe yet," she reminded him, "but we have shown them that we are not easy prey. That may be enough for now." The cowboy felt a mix of relief and admiration. He had always believed he could survive alone, but now he understood that trust, guidance, and teamwork were invaluable. The woman had not only saved his life, but she had taught him lessons about courage, patience, and intelligence that he would carry forever. He realized that facing danger together created a bond stronger than any friendship he had known before. They continued their journey, moving cautiously through the canyon and into open land where they could see for miles. The cowboy's muscles ached, his energy was low, but his mind was sharper than ever. He followed her lead, watching her signals, learning to anticipate threats, and appreciating the wisdom she had shared. Each step reminded him that survival was not just about physical strength, it was about observation, strategy, and trust in the right people. As the day wore on, they found a small grove where they could rest safely. The cowboy dismounted, exhausted but grateful, and drank from a nearby stream, feeling the cool water revive him. The woman tended to the horses, moving with efficiency and care. She shared food with him, and they sat together quietly, letting the adrenaline of the earlier danger fade. The cowboy felt a deep sense of respect for her, understanding that true courage was shown not only in facing danger, but in guiding others through it with skill and care. That night, as they set up a small camp beneath the stars, the cowboy reflected on the day's events. He realized that he had learned more in a single day than he had in years of traveling alone. The desert was not just a place of danger, it was a place of lessons, of growth, and of human connection. And he had learned that survival was never meant to be a solitary endeavor. With the right guidance, the right trust, and the right courage, even the harshest challenges could be faced and overcome. As he settled beside the fire, he looked at the woman tending the horses and felt gratitude unlike anything he had known. She had risked herself to protect him, used her skill to guide them through danger, and shared knowledge that might one day save his life again. He realized that the bond between them was no longer just about survival. It was about respect, trust, and an understanding that true courage could exist in unexpected forms. The desert night stretched on, filled with quiet sounds and distant movements. The cowboy felt a sense of calm, tempered by the memory of the day's danger. He knew that the journey was far from over, that challenges still awaited, but he also knew that he was no longer alone. With the woman by his side, he felt capable of facing whatever the desert could throw at him. And for the first time in a long while, he truly believed in the power of courage, trust, and human connection. As he drifted into sleep beneath the stars, the cowboy understood something important. The desert was unforgiving, but it also taught lessons that could not be learned anywhere else. He had learned about strategy, about courage, and about the importance of trusting others. And he knew that the bond he had formed with the woman who had saved him would continue to guide him through the trials ahead, giving him the strength to face whatever dangers remained in the vast, wild land that stretched endlessly before them. The desert morning was calm, almost peaceful, but the cowboy knew better than to trust appearances. He had learned over the past days that the desert could shift from serene to dangerous in an instant. Yet, for the first time, he felt a sense of hope and purpose. He was no longer just a man fighting for survival. He was part of a journey that had taught him lessons he would never forget. The Apache woman, as always, was alert and steady, her eyes scanning the horizon while her hands worked with practiced care to prepare the horses for the day. They continued their journey slowly, aware that exhaustion and lingering injuries still made them vulnerable. The cowboy noticed how much he had grown since the day he had collapsed in the desert. He had learned patience, observation, and strategy. He had learned to rely on someone else, to trust in guidance, and to recognize that courage could take many forms. The woman's presence had become more than just a guide. It had become a steadying force, a quiet example of bravery and resilience that he would carry with him forever. As the sun climbed higher, they approached a small settlement, the first signs of civilization they had seen since leaving the canyon. The sight filled the cowboy with relief, but he also felt a pang of sadness. He realized that their journey together was nearing its end. He had grown attached to her presence, her guidance, and the quiet strength she embodied. The thought of parting ways was bittersweet, but he knew that her path would always be separate from his own. When they arrived at the settlement, the cowboy's horse was tired and sore, but it had carried him safely through every danger. He dismounted carefully, feeling the familiar ache in his muscles and side, yet also feeling the warmth of accomplishment. The woman helped him steady himself, her hands strong yet gentle. "You have done well," she said simply. "You survived. That is what matters." Her words were understated, but the weight of them carried deep meaning. She had seen him through danger, guided him with wisdom, and now acknowledged his growth and survival. In the days that followed, the cowboy recovered slowly in the safety of the settlement. He was able to rest properly, eat nourishing food, and allow his wounds to heal. Yet every moment he spent in the quiet of his recovery reminded him of the lessons he had learned in the desert. He thought about the patience, knowledge, and courage the woman had shown him. He thought about the trust he had built and the ways in which his own perspective had shifted. He understood now that survival was not merely about strength or skill. It was about awareness, compassion, and connection. The woman visited him one last time before continuing her own path. She arrived with her horse, calm and steady as ever, and offered a small smile. "The desert has taught you well," she said. "Remember what you have learned. Use it wisely. Life will continue to test you, but you are stronger now than you were before." The cowboy nodded, his heart heavy with gratitude and respect. He wanted to say more, to express the depth of his appreciation, but words seemed small compared to the magnitude of what she had done for him. Instead, he simply bowed his head in acknowledgement, a silent gesture of respect that spoke louder than any words could. They walked together for a short distance outside the settlement, the cowboy walking beside her horse as they prepared to part ways. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. He knew that their paths were diverging, that she had her own journey to continue, and that his life would move in a different direction. Yet, he also knew that the bond they had formed, the trust, respect, and lessons shared, would stay with him forever. Before she left, she placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Remember," she said, "life is about more than survival. It is about how you treat others, the choices you make, and the courage to act when it matters most. Don't forget what you have learned." He nodded again, feeling the full weight of her words. He had learned more than he could have imagined, about the desert, about survival, and about himself. And he knew that the wisdom she had shared would continue to guide him in the days and years to come. As she rode away, the cowboy watched her disappear into the horizon, her figure growing smaller against the vast desert landscape. He felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. Sadness because their journey together had ended, and gratitude because he had been given a chance to survive, to learn, and to grow under her guidance. He understood now that courage was not always loud or visible. It could be quiet, steadfast, and deeply meaningful. The desert had tested him, shaped him, and shown him the power of human connection and compassion. The cowboy remained in the settlement for several weeks, recovering fully and reflecting on the journey he had endured. He met other travelers, shared his story cautiously, and sometimes offered guidance to those who seemed lost or struggling. He found that the lessons he had learned were not limited to the desert. They applied to life in every place, in every decision, and in every encounter with another person. He had learned patience, observation, trust, and the importance of helping others when it mattered most. In the quiet moments, he often thought of the woman who had saved him. He remembered her calm strength, her knowledge of the land, and the way she had guided him through the dangers of the desert with patience and courage. He realized that her actions had changed him profoundly, teaching him lessons that he would carry for the rest of his life. He felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude, understanding that not everyone is given the chance to learn from someone so wise and courageous. Eventually, the cowboy knew it was time to continue his own journey. He saddled his horse, packed his belongings, and prepared to leave the settlement. Yet, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He was no longer the man who had stumbled alone through the desert, weak and uncertain. He was stronger, wiser, and more aware of the world around him. He had faced danger, survived, and learned lessons that would guide him for the rest of his life. As he rode away, the desert stretched endlessly before him, vast and unpredictable, yet no longer frightening. He felt a sense of connection to the land, a respect for its beauty and danger, and a newfound understanding of human courage and kindness. He thought about the woman who had saved him, knowing that her wisdom and guidance had shaped not just his survival, but his understanding of life itself. The cowboy continued his journey, moving forward with confidence, awareness, and gratitude. He encountered challenges along the way, as he knew he would, but he faced them with the lessons he had learned. He remembered the quiet strength of the woman, the careful guidance through danger, and the patience required to survive in a harsh, unforgiving world. And he carried those lessons with him, understanding that courage, compassion, and trust were more powerful than any weapon or skill. Years later, the cowboy would remember the journey in the desert as a turning point in his life. He would recall the day he collapsed, the moment the woman appeared, and the path they had traveled together. He would remember her words, her actions, and the way she had guided him through danger with wisdom and courage. And he would know that, even in the most difficult circumstances, there are moments of kindness, strength, and human connection that can change a life forever. The desert remained vast and wild, full of dangers and mysteries, but the cowboy had learned its lessons. He had learned about survival, about courage, and about the power of trusting others. He had learned that even in the harshest conditions, there was room for compassion and human connection. And he knew that the bond he had formed with the woman who had saved him would continue to guide him, inspire him, and remind him of the strength and kindness that could exist even in the most unexpected places. And as he rode on into the endless horizon, the cowboy felt a sense of peace, hope, and purpose. He had survived, he had learned, and he had grown. The desert had tested him, challenged him, and shaped him. But most importantly, it had shown him that courage, trust, and compassion were the true tools of survival, and that even in the wildest, most unforgiving places, the human heart could find strength, connection, and hope.